20 years is stretching it. Some people are just so incredibly lucky they find somebody that hangs with them all through their life. True? So if you've got somebody that, and you would say, this has been my friend, or you're thinking of somebody's been a friend to you, not just somebody you know, but you would actually say, this is a friend. Tim, we're out of the game. We can't be in that because we're like old. Okay? We've known each other like well over 60 years. So if somebody is your friend, think of who that person is. How long would you guesstimate? Raise your hand. It'd be interesting to see. Okay, would you stand, Teresa? And who are you thinking of? And her name is? Diana. Okay, somebody, yeah, Mr. Weiser. 51 years. Very good. Wow. Very good. Go ahead. Somebody else got a friend for a long time. Yes, go ahead. Stand up. Tell everybody who you are. Okay, Dawn. And your best friend is Peggy? 57 years. Do you still see this person? Wow. Very cool. Thank you. Somebody else. Is that Trish? You got the light behind. Yeah, who? Okay, and how many years total, you think? 45 years. Have Larry take his shoes off, you can count. Way in the back, who is that? Oh, yeah. 45 years. Isn't that amazing? One more. Is that Mare Bear? Go ahead, Mare. Connie Berkemer, yes. For how many years do you think? 45 years. Very good. Now, in the past year, we're going to go back to 2022. From 2022 up to this point, you've met somebody and you have just bonded with that person. You go, wow, this is a good friend to me. Raise your hand. Okay. I want to say Leo. That's what she has on Facebook. Why do you have Leo? Chris. Who? Kathy. Kathy, you were going to say? Very good. In the past year. Okay, very good. And did you know each other really before church? Okay. Okay, but church has helped bond you together. Somebody else in the last year. Go ahead, hon. Okay, about 3 months. Is this at college you met this person? It depends on who's paying. All right, somebody else. Yeah, who is that? Stand up, because the light's right behind you at the window and I can't see. Oh. Good. Bev is your new friend. Very good. Has she invited you over to her house yet? Has she invited you over to her house? Okay. Somebody else, you got a new friend. Anyone? Yes. Who? Okay. And? This is your friend? Okay. Anybody else? Guys, you have no friends? What's going on here? Nora? Kevin, stand up. Who? Okay, because you work at the school. Okay. Very good. Kev? Sure. Okay. Okay. You just like Don because of his boat. Everybody buy a boat. You have all kinds of friends. We're talking about friends. And by doing so, we're looking at Bible characters who display qualities that we would hope to have in our life to be a friend, but also in people who would be our friends. We're not necessarily looking at friendship pairs. Occasionally we'll do that. But we're looking at people who exhibit the qualities that we would hope to have in those people who are on our life journey, if you will. Today we're looking at a group of friends. The last few weeks we've looked at individual friends. So today we're simply going to look at a group of friends. And they're found in the book of Daniel. You can turn there. It's in the Old Testament. Some of you may need to just have a couple moments to get there. A good many of us have groups of friends. Kevin just mentioned that. Or we have several groups of friends. And generally when we have friends, they tend to fall into some category, one or another. One of my best friends on planet Earth is a guy by the name of Steve Hudson. He has a travel group. People, they only really get together when they travel some other country. They'll meet once or twice during the year, but it's a travel group of friends. And I said, what do you have to do to be part of the group? He says, you have to be able to play nice and get along with multiple people. Okay? It doesn't mean that they're essentially that close, but they enjoy what? Travel. Some of you, you may have a sports group or a hobby group. They share similar interests to you. Some of you have a foodie group. You just love to go out to eat with these particular people. And I know several people, they have a foodie group. There's some that just have a life group. You do life together. Here would be a classic example. So in your own mind, have you ever seen, just answer the question, have you ever seen the show Friends? If so, can you name them all from left to right? Just, if you can, raise your hand. Like 4 of you. All right. One of the most popular TV shows ever, and it was named what? Friends, because of the friendship. Now, you may not want to have a relationship with any of them, but what they showed us is that people can bond. And sometimes people in the group are weird, right? If you look at your friends, you think of your friends, not all of you are sane. There's usually at least one whacked person in the group. There's one that's a little annoying. There's usually a grump. There's one that's high maintenance. It's terrible if it's all the same person. Okay? Usually when you're in a group like that, you don't have a formal invitation. In most groups, they don't send you something inviting you to the group, although there are those secret groups that do that. But over time, you all come together. You just figure out there's something about this person that you connect with. So I want you to be thinking about who you hang with. Who are the people in your groups? And a bigger question would be, why them and not somebody else? Generally, we have something in common, true? With those types of people. And those common interests can all vary one from another. So as we look at the book of Daniel, we're looking at a group, and it's a group of 4. A group of 4. They're all teenagers. Okay? This is what we've got to understand. The book of Daniel is all about a group of teenagers that initially get together, and it sort of follows them through life. They're Jewish boys, if you will. They've experienced many hardships. Hardships that really nobody in this room has ever faced. And yet they hang together and they support one another. They faced great dangers together. They were all forced to leave home against their own wishes. They were forced to settle into a new land many miles away from their homeland. And one of the interesting things about the individuals in this group is they're the cream of the crop. The cream of the crop. They're the brightest, they're the best looking, they're the most socially gifted, and they're from well-to-do families. And they're thrust together really for the most of the rest of their lives, from teenagers up into their 80s. We're going to look at Daniel chapter 1, and I thought about some factors, if you will, that formed their friendship. What were some of the things that got them to bond together? Because if we think about our friendship groups, there's probably some key factors that brought you together with this person, but not with somebody else. When Tim Reed, I've mentioned Tim a number of times through this series, we've known each other probably pushing 65 years. One of the key factors is this: we were both raised in what kind of homes, besides strict? Catholic homes. And there weren't that many Catholics that we were aware of when we were at Springfield High School in Battle Creek. So on Fridays, what don't you eat, Tim, back in the day? Yeah. So we would have similar sandwiches and things like that. There were some common things that brought us together. One of the other things that Tim and I were involved in, and Tim excelled in, was Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts. Became an Eagle Scout and beyond. We had similar interests with the outdoors. Those interests continued. Tim was a tennis player. He was competitive. I didn't know what tennis was until Tim told me about it. I was a football player. But they're sports. We enjoyed sports. We enjoyed competition. We were both intellectually gifted. Wouldn't you say, Tim? We tended to get ourselves in trouble, generally. And that bonded us together over the years. And it's been, wouldn't it be fun to go 100 years, Tim? Yeah. Okay. So as we think about our friends and we think about our friendship groups, what are the qualities? What are the factors that have put you together, drawn together, but more importantly, what? Kept you together. Why are we looking at that aspect today? Because I want you to be grateful for the friends that you have in life. We would all say we are, but rarely do we express it as often as we should. One of the things I noticed this week in the news, very famous pastor, theologian, writer by the name of Tim Keller passed away. Tim Keller was my age. He was old? Yep, he was old. Tim Keller passed away. He has been a rock in the Christian church here in America for decades. Very gifted writer, passed away. He leaves behind not just family, he leaves behind multiple friends. My sports hero through my high school years, a famous football player, passed away. Who was he? Jim Brown. Probably, next to Barry Sanders, I would say the greatest running back in NFL history. Passed away. I think he was 87. He was in movies and all that. We're all going to die. Do you realize that? And nobody likes thinking about it, but it is part of life, and you're going to. And when you die, you leave behind your family, which is true. You leave behind all of your possessions, but you also leave behind your friends, and your friends will dearly miss you. I want you to express your appreciation more than what you have to your friends. But also, the reason for the message today, not just that, there's three reasons. That's one. The other is to look at the factors that have bonded me with these people, learn those factors, and then reach out of your comfort zone and build new relationships with people. I'm not kidding you. In a church like this, somebody sitting on the other side of the auditorium may be your very best friend that you've yet to meet. Do you realize that? That's an amazing thought. That's one of the great things about what God has done in our lives. He changes us to be more like Jesus. And if he's helping me to be more like Jesus, he's helping you to be more like Jesus. There's a chance we could what? We could connect and actually like each other. And it'd be a shame to get to heaven and God say, hey, did you meet Tom? Tom who? Well, he attended church with you for 30 years. Oh, and the Lord plays a little 35 millimeter camera or video or whatever he's got up there. And you see that Tom was like 2 rows over. Another table. Same row, just different. And you never got off your butt to meet the people of the church that the Lord's brought here. So I want you to be appreciative of your friends. I want you to look around us and try to build upon success. You've got friends. What has it taken for you to have friends with somebody? And try to learn from those and develop new friends. You with me? Third thing is this: appreciate God more. God loves you dearly. He loves you more than your grandmother. Okay, he loves you more than the IRS. All right? God loves you. And I want you to understand that God wants an intimate, personal relationship with you. He wants to be your what? Your friend. He called Abraham that. You can have a friendship with God. So there, as I thought about all of this, I have a weird way of thinking. I just think off the page sometimes. And I'm thinking of these guys here in Daniel 1, these 4 teenagers. And I began to process as I'm going, 4. You know, there's a lot of groups of 4 in our culture, in the Bible, in our lives. In the New Testament, we often think of Jesus and his 12. But do you realize there were 3 people that were very close to Jesus, closer than the others? Who were they? John, James, and Peter. There's a group of 4 in the midst of a larger group. True? Think about this. Think of culture. Within many of the games that we have grown up playing, within books we've read, movies, TV, and music, the number 4 continually pops up when you think of relationships. Look at this one. Pac-Man. Going left to right, who are they? Quick. Come on, people, you've played this game. I know, it's been decades. Blinky, Plinky, Inky, and Clyde. All right, some of you never played. How about this group? Left to right. Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, Human Torch, and The Thing. Moving up. How about this one? The Hobbits, Lord of the Ring, left to right. Come on, Aaron Smith. You should know that. Do you remember them? Some of you don't even know who the Lord of the Rings is. Merry, Frodo, Pippin, and Samwise. Now, this changes because this movie has been remade numerous times. Okay, that's the 1993 version of the Three Musketeers. Left to right. Not their real name. Who are they? Athos, Aramis, D'Artagnan, and Porthos. Very good. How about this one? Maybe you'll get this. Left to right. Do you see how many groups of 4 there are? Scarecrow, Tin Man, Dorothy, and Cowardly Lion. Now this one. I gave the first one away here. Left to right. Okay, now, men, I don't think you're going to get this. This is a 2019 movie, Little Women. Everybody's seen it? Meg, Joe, Amy, and Beth. Very good. Some of you remember that. Now, think of the number 4. ABBA, my wife's favorite group. How many people? There's 4. Beatles, how many? The 4 Seasons? Okay, Queen. You could go on and on with music groups. Around your table, What comes to mind when you think of four-person groups? I'll throw out one. I'm an Irish fan. What am I thinking, Aaron? The four what? Four horsemen. You ever hear of them? That's why you're Michigan and Michigan State fans. You don't know good football. All right, round your table, round your chair. Groups of four in some aspect of life. Quickly, you got 1 minute. Name them. All right, your minute's up. Raise your hand and just tell me one group of four that you thought of. Yeah, way back there, Burpee. Oh yeah, Fred, Ethel, Ricky, and Lucy. Okay, yes. Is that Brian? Ninja Turtle. That was also on my list. Somebody else. Very good. Dave. Mount Rushmore. Excellent. Yes. What is it? Golden Girls was on my list. What else? Denny? Ghostbusters. Very good. Another one I had down. Somebody else. Groups of four. Yes. Who? Oh, yeah, Kiss. Again, a lot of groups, right? Okay, a lot of, how about, was the Supremes four? Temptations. What? Okay, you get the point. A lot of groups of four. You might want to look that up. The Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe. How many kids? Very good. Another one. The Penguins of Madagascar. 4. The Marx Brothers. You could go on and on and on. Daniel chapter 1. You need to be there today. You should have notes. If you don't know this, you walk into church. On the central kiosk, we have half sheets of paper that you can take notes on. Also, the two little round tables, just as you walk in the door right in front of you there, they also have these. If you want to get up, go get one, fine. Otherwise, just remember that. We're looking at Daniel 1. The story takes place approximately, get this, 2,628 years ago. That's a long time ago. 2,628 years ago. It takes place in the year 605 BC. Normally, when you hear dates like that, your eyes glass over and you reach for your phone to scroll through it. Because most people are not lovers of history. But without history, we would not be where we are today. History has many lessons that we can learn from. This is an important event, what we're seeing here in Daniel 1. It's an important year, 605. We would call it the 7th century. That was an incredibly important century for humanity, especially for biblical history. There was so much that happened in the 600s. You start from the 605 and you go all the way down through the year 500. So much happened in that time frame. The Middle Eastern world was in more chaos then than it is today, and that is absolutely hard to believe. The mighty Assyrian army, which is considered the greatest army of all time and the greatest empire, the largest empire that has ever existed, had just wiped out the northern kingdom of Israel. If you remember, Israel had been divided into the southern, northern kingdom. In addition, they wiped out the previous powerhouse on planet Earth, which was Egypt. And the Assyrians did it, and they had no mercy. They are considered to be the cruelest army that has ever existed. And that's saying something when we sort of know the last 100 years. Okay? Quickly, however, the Babylonians knocked the Assyrians off. We would use the term inconceivable from Princess Bride, that just could not happen. The Babylonians came out of nowhere and knocked them off. That gave Babylon then, if we will, ownership rights to virtually all of civilized humanity, including Israel. While the northern kingdom had been taken out, now Babylon came after the southern kingdom, which was known as Judah. And they don't come after Judah just to get Judah. They're going down to further decimate Egypt, and on the way they're going to run into Judah. So they attack, and in 3 different major attacks, they come after Judah, spanning about 15 to 20 years. And it leads to what you and I as Christians would refer to as the 70-year captivity. You ever hear that? Where the Jews, we would say, it's the southern Jews, are led off into Babylon. And that's where the book of Daniel comes in. It really takes place over in Babylon. Hardly it refers to anything going on within the former land of Israel. It's a story of 4 Jewish boys. Now get this, they're teenagers. They're anywhere from 14, 15, up to 20. No older than that from what we know just in biblical and what we would call secular history. They're taken captive. But God uses them in the midst of that. The fact that they're many miles away, the fact that their homeland has been virtually destroyed and flattened and burned. God uses them in the midst of their trouble. If you get nothing else from this message, God is there for you in the midst of your trouble. And if you turn to God and you make Him your priority, you will get through it. Your troubles in life are going to crush you, or they're going to help you become a better person as you go into the future. Their attitudes, the way they live, their actions, the way they behave, restore hope to the Jewish people that have been taken captive. In addition, because of their faith in God, God uses these 4 teenagers. They're not adults. They're not learned scholars. They didn't go to college. They didn't have a degree. Teenagers, probably separated from their family. He uses them to not only instill hope into the Jewish people so they keep looking for the day when God will bring them back, but He uses them to change a pagan nation. A pagan nation. What it requires is people of faith. You see, we as Christians, we sit here sometimes, especially in the last 3 or 4 years of our nation, and we want to just cover up. We want to crawl into a hole. We don't want to raise our voice. We think we have to do whatever somebody tells us to do. These 4 changed a pagan nation because they stood up for God and didn't bow down when they were told to. Hear me. 4 people, teenagers, changed their nation, changed the nation they were in. So can. And see, that should have been, you should have been roaring. So can we. So can us. So can I. You see, I don't know that we believe that anymore. God can use your life. He can use your life to do the most amazing things you can't even dream of. What 4 teenage boys ever think about changing a nation? I know 4 young men did back in the 1770s. You ever hear of Sam Adams? George Washington, Ben Franklin? They were not older men. They changed the course of the world because they had faith in each other and faith in God. background. To understand this first chapter, we've got to know those facts and then focus on the relationship. Most people, when they look at Daniel, they think of prophecy. And that's a very real part, but that's not part of our series. Our series is just looking at these four guys and what can we learn from them. They had an incredible friendship group. Now, one of the pictures I showed you up there was the Fantastic Four. Do you remember that? The Fantastic Four. I call these guys the Faithful Four. They endured numerous temptations, numerous trials. They stayed faithful. Another thing you can learn from this message. Doesn't matter what you go through, God's still there. Stay faithful to Him because He is faithful to you. And if you become a grump butt, you become despondent and despair and depressed. You'll miss out on what God wants to do in you and through you in this world. When I look at the four guys in Daniel, I think of these guys here. The adventures of the merry men of Sherwood Forest. There's Robin Hood. There's Little John. There's Will Scarlet. And the guy who's not here because he's always off helping the poor, Friar, another group of four. Nobody said that one. Sometimes life changes, and it changes, unfortunately, against you. And it's usually very drastic, and it's usually very quick. We're familiar with sudden storms. You ever been in a sudden storm? I love this picture. It's a lighthouse, and that is an actual wave. And if you look real close, right in the middle of the picture, there's some dude that came out to check the weather. All right? You ever been in a sudden storm? I remember with our missionary Mark Edwards from Costa Rica in a condo way up high over the Sea of Galilee, and we watched one of those famous storms like the one where Jesus calmed the wave come up over the Golan Heights and settle. It came that fast. Storms can be sudden. What about earthquakes? Do you get advance notice? You do, but not very much. How about a tornado? An assassin or a maniac's bullet. Excuse me, sir, I'm going to shoot you. Could you pose the other direction? No, they just shoot you. It comes quickly. And usually these things are extremely dangerous. The stroke of a politician's pen. One person with an agenda can sign their name and you lose a lot of your rights. Have you figured that out yet? Be careful of who you vote for. How about an employer's decision? Can that affect you? A medical diagnosis. You walked in feeling good. You walk out wondering how long you've got to live. And then there's a relational breakup. A good many of us have been there. I'll never forget Sherry, when we got married, she was telling me about one of her boyfriends over at Delton High School. He was a big athlete and all, but he was rather doofy, in her words. And I said, well, how'd you break up with him? Well, she said, I didn't know what to say to him. Well, yeah, but how'd you break up with him? Well, there was no good time. How'd you break up with him? Well, she said, he walked me to my door or at the class. He's holding my books, and I just know if I can get in this class and break up with him before I go to the class, because he's got another class, life would be better. I said, so what did you do? She says, I took his ring off, and he was standing there with a pencil like this, holding her books. She dropped it over his pencil, grabbed her books, and ran into her room. Breakups can be quick. That was not well thought out, but it makes for a funny story if you think about it. These four kids, none of us can imagine a foreign nation conquering the U.S. Can you? I mean, not just, well, they are currently, but we won't go there. But a foreign nation who destroys our buildings, who burns the remnants of it, who slaughters a third or more of our population. Can you even comprehend that? Yes? Do you realize that's happened to virtually every major world power in history? Why do we think we're going to escape? The only thing we've got, well, two things we've had going for it. One is that we have tended to lean towards God and Israel. The second thing is we're so stinking isolated from the real world. True? But it can happen. None of us can really imagine watching our family slaughtered in front of our eyes by foreign oppressors. We cannot imagine people chaining us, putting loops around our neck, and leading us by the hundreds to another border. Can you imagine that? Because that's what we're talking about here. And we can't imagine getting there and being told you can never talk about who you are, who your family was, the nation you were from, and surely not the God you worship. Welcome to Israel 2,628 years ago. And when bad stuff happens to you, do you ever whine about it? Do you complain? Do you get your little group, your group of friends, why is this happening to me? And have you ever dared to raise your voice and your vision and your finger towards God and say, where are any of you? If you're honest, some of us, you may not have said it, but you probably thought it. In chapter 1, as you read it, you see numerous factors. I could have listed 20 things that I saw in Daniel 1. I made a long list, and I went, well, dude, you can't preach on all of that. But it led these young men to not only survive, but to thrive in the midst of all that they went through. They thrived as friends. It just drew them together, did not push them away. They thrived as followers of God. It increased their faith. Some of you will admit you've gone through tough times. It's made you a better Christian. John talked about that a little bit. But it also gave them a new outlook on life, that God has us in this situation because He wants us to influence those around us. He wants us to be faithful. Listen to Daniel 1.
Daniel, chapter 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia, and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring
That is Daniel chapter 1. Hopefully you got enough to get the big picture of what's going on here. When you go through the book of Daniel, again, most people think, oh, it's all about prophecy. Here's my lessons from the book of Daniel, and you see elements of it all here in chapter 1. First is this: God is there. You're going through your troubles, you think He's not there. Hey, He is there. Secondly, God is aware of what you're going through. And that really is a good principle. He's aware. You're not alone. And the third is the best of them all. He cares. God is there, He is aware, and He cares. Now, I mentioned I pulled out close to 20 different factors that from just this chapter that put their relationship together and allowed them, especially Daniel, for the next 70 years, many Bible scholars say maybe 80 years plus of his life. So I'm just going to settle on 4 of them, quick ones. What can we learn from Daniel chapter 1 that we can look into our own lives and say, how do these principles help me to identify people who could be potential friends, but also how do these 4 principles help me to honor the friends that God has given me? Are you with me? Here's the first. They shared and this is in your notes, they shared a common heritage and historical timeline. When you read through Daniel chapter 1, verse 1 through 4, you see that they grew up in the same land, the same city. They had similar backgrounds. They were children of the nobility, the king and his family, or nobles. They had some things in common. You want to have a good friendship? You've got to have things in. So this is where you begin to look around church. You say, okay, I'd like to work with wood. I wonder if there's anybody else in church that works with wood. I like sports. Is there anybody else that's involved? It doesn't matter if it's the same sport. There's similar elements in every sport. I like to shop. Is there anybody here that loves to shop? And that's when you start looking around, and it helps you identify people who are potential friends. They lived through so much in their first 15 years. It was incredible. They lived through the reign of good King Josiah, followed by 4 of the worst kings that Judah ever produced. They saw the good and the bad in nobility. They lived through the ministry, get this, of the prophets Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah. They lived through the chaos of the Middle East, Assyria falling apart, Babylon coming in, Egypt collapsing. And they survived the walk from Babylon, or from Israel over to Babylon. They shared a common heritage, historical timeline. They had things in common. Tim Reed and I were born in the 1950s. About 2/3 of this church or more don't even know what the 1950s were about. It bonds us. Why? Because there's certain things that happened in history that we were part of, that we saw, that we observed, that we interacted with. Tim and I have a relationship. Very few of you could ever have that same relationship with us because you lack those common denominators. That doesn't make us unapproachable. It just it explains to you why we have a bond, why you would have a bond with certain people here in this church. You may ask yourself, or I may ask you this question: have you ever been divorced? People have been married all of their life, cannot understand divorce. They know what the word means, but they've never what? They've never been through it. That immediately gives you a little bond to somebody else. There's so much that we have in common as a church, and yet there's so much that we don't have in common. We have to work hard to not only keep the relationships we've got, but build on them. And if you want to have a friend or be a friend, then you look for common heritage. How many of you have Polish in your background? Be proud of that. Okay, raise your hand. I can immediately bond with these people because I'm half Polish. Tim, are you Polish? It wasn't the Polak side of us that bonded. But it does open doors where we could connect. Are you with me? I don't have to beat that horse to death. Second principle is this. They spent a lot of time together on the road called life. Here's a map. I'm a map guy. They went from Jerusalem over here to the capital city, Babylon. Why didn't they go in a straight line? Somebody figure that out. What's the big words between them? Arabian what? You ain't going too far. Not if you got to take thousands of people that are in chains and ropes and carrying their stuff. You're not going to make it through the desert. So they follow the water and they follow the existing major roads about 1,000 miles. You ever walked 1,000 miles in one journey? And you've got women and children and older people. You've got ducks, you've got geese, you've got goats that you're trying to take along. People are dying along the way. Hey, it takes a while to go 1,000 miles. Would you agree? They shared time together. Not only while they were in the city and they're going through the battles of Babylon as they're trying to take the city, but when they got to Babylon, they trained together for 3 years. Every day it'd be like going to college, going to high school. 3 years they're in the same classes, learning the same stuff. They're being brainwashed by the government, by the Babylonian government. They're learning their language, they're learning their culture, they're learning their music. They even have their names what? Changed. Their names, we know Jewish names, always signified some character aspect that their parents wanted in their children. Every new name, the Babylonian names that you look at in that text, all of them honor the Babylonian gods. Be careful of governments that want to change your identity or control your identity. There's a reason behind it, and it's never a good reason. Then there's 70 years maybe together in Babylon. They spent a lot of what? Time. You want to have friends, you got to invest the time. Now, not all relationships are equal. Some friends you can pick it up after being apart for a year, and it's like you never left them. True? There's other friends that you just have to invest the time in. Why? Life changes so stinking quick. And the person you knew today isn't going to be the same person a year from now. They'll look older. They'll have gained weight. It's inevitable. They'll have lost hair. They wear a patch. Whatever it may be. All right? I've got to look. Is that the same guy I grew up with? Spend time, folks. Number 3, they stood against the pressure to compromise and change. In Daniel 1, verse 2 through 8. Babylon in the Bible is always a picture of the world. And you've got to ask yourself, Christian, is that the way you look? You're still looking out, but your face has become more and more like the world. You're not living a Christian life anymore. You've morphed. You've changed. The world has conformed you. This is a battle till the day we die. And you've got to ask yourself, am I becoming more like the world or more like Jesus? And you parents that have kids in government schools, you better ask yourself the same question. Are my kids, is that school system indoctrinating them, helping them to live more like the world, or is it helping them be more like Jesus? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that one out. And when you invest 18 years in a child's life in a government school, you're going to get a government child. And if you're not looking at the news, every week there's some government official talking about the fact that you don't have rights over your children. They're our kids. And that's the verbiage they use. 30 years ago, that never would have been said. It's being said regularly now. We need to periodically ask ourselves, am I becoming more like the world or more like Jesus? Their life radically changed. I've got a whole list of changes that you see in the text. I'm not even going to talk about those now. Their lives changed, but they resisted the change. They fought the change. They didn't compromise their faith, and they didn't change to be more like the government. They stayed more like God. Are you with me? We have to ask ourselves the same question. You have to have friends in your life that share godly values, or at least values that as a Christian do not seek to crush you or conform you, but the values are similar too. That's why you can have good non-Christian friends. But you can't have a close friend who's not a Christian that is opposed to your God or the Christian faith openly. You cannot. Why? Because they will seek to change you. And you can change somebody by being overt or covert underneath. Fourth principle, this one is very simple. They serve God in the midst of their circumstances. Is there not a picture with that? Thank you. This is an artist's rendering based upon what we know Babylon would have looked like. It was probably the biggest city, populated city on planet Earth at the time. Remnants of that are still there. During the military conflicts, Desert Storm and the rest, they have found the ruins of all of these cities. It was massive. All right? The point is very simple. In the midst of their circumstances, in the midst of being carried off, in the midst of seeing family and friends slaughtered, in the midst of having their identity the government attempting to change them, they still serve God. They didn't cry out, change our circumstances. They said, give us the strength to live and impact the people who you've placed us in. That's how you and I are to live. You need to find people who are not quitters in their Christian life. You don't look for people to be friends who have compromised their faith because of what they're going through. You look for strong people who still love God, who still serve God, and that's who you seek to build relationships with. Because if you don't, they will tube you. They'll drag you down. That's just some of the things that I learned here in Daniel 1. When you go home, here's some things. You pick one of these and do it. Number one, thank God for your current friends and His care for you. We need to be more appreciative of our friends because your friends won't always be here. Secondly, take time to reflect upon your friends and, I'm sorry. First is thank God for your friends. I ran the two together. Secondly is take time to honor your friends. Think about your friends. Bless your friends. Did I confuse you? Thank God. Take time to reflect. Third is trust God in the midst of your circumstances. You have to trust Him. Some things, like John said, health issues especially, are out of your... So it's never, why me, Lord? Why did this happen to me? But how can I honor you and serve you as I go through this? That's our approach to the problems of life. And then the last one, with the picture, I want you to really think about this. Think about whether you're more like the world or more like Christ as a result of your friendships. Is this person helped me to be a better Christian? Has this person helped me to apply the Bible in my life? Is this person kicking my butt when I go off, helping me to behave in my attitude, my words, my actions as a Christian? You need to evaluate your friends and pick good friends. Any of that make sense? That's what Daniel 1 taught me. Father, for our people here, you've given us tremendous gift, and they are called friends. We pray, Father, that we would be more grateful for them, and especially grateful to you for those gifts into our life. Help us, Lord, to really examine our lives and see if through the midst of life, if we've become more like you or more like the world around us. And in doing this, Lord, we'll honor you for those gifts. So I look at this church, I see people here I dearly love, people here who have been a support, people who've been an encouragement, and I see people here that need that from others in this church. So may we, in the next month or so, get out of our comfort zone, have some fun with the people of our congregation, and just be a little friendlier, and maybe we'll find that new best friend. We ask this in Christ's name.